Hey there, I'm Greg Nicotero.
Hi, my name is Coleman Domingo.
Hi, I'm Benai Garcia.
Hi, I am Mo Collins.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here are your hosts, Cinik, Igrihe, and Ryan.
And you are listening to episode 103 of the Cinik Radio Podcast. I'm your host and the Mueller Report of podcasting, Cinik. And joining me as always, your friends and mine, Igrihe and Ryan. And on this week's show, we review Season 9, Episode 15 of The Walking Dead entitled The Calm Before. The Whispers have unleashed the pikes on our heroes. Find out who lives, who doesn't, and how we feel about it. Because we are the Cinik Radio Podcast. Like, listen, subscribe, but most importantly, don't try this at home. The episode opens up with an unknown couple fighting walkers on their anniversary, and they find Hilltop, and we get small snapshots of their lives moving forward on the same day every year, all the way up to the point where they get into the cart to go to the fair. Miles and Hildy load up a cart, and they're headed out. IG, now I know that the episode was an hour and 25 minutes long last night, but do you feel like we could have spent a little bit more time with them, getting to know this couple to be a little more emotionally vested?
Yeah, that's one of the problems with the episode, and this was a pretty good episode compared to last week's. I really did enjoy the episode, but I didn't know enough about these characters. And funnily enough, just with the little bit they did give us, I did gain an investment, and I was into what was happening, and it did affect me when their demise ultimately came. But they could have, if these people would have been entwined even a little bit, even in passing, if you'd have seen them in previous seasons, previous episodes, anything, maybe there would have been a little more feeling about what happened with them. But yeah, I think that it was a missed opportunity. It was a wasted opportunity to really take a few minutes to make us feel like why it's impactful that they're going to die.
It felt kind of thrown together to me. I thought it was well done, and I really did like them as characters, even though they were on the screen for less than 5 minutes. They really could have introduced them at some point in the season. I mean, the coins had come up previously, but there was no character associated with it. It would have really hurt a little more, or would have stung a little more when they died if we would have known anything about them. But I did think it was a neat way to open, people turning their lives around, coming out of the woods, finding this settlement. I do like the fact that they didn't spend half the episode on them, but at the same time, I think we could have got more than 5 minutes, and it would have, kind of quenched my thirst to find out who they were, and I would have cared a little bit more when bad things had happened to them. Ryan, the symbols of hope laid spilled out all over the floor, blood covered, and I started thinking two things. Wait, is Alpha about to scalp this lady? And the second was, we're 7 years into this. This is a terrible situation, and people had to be pretty badass to make it this far. And they all probably had stories of struggle for survival, near death, and it all sucks when death shows up. But at the same time, how bad does it suck that your death comes just through an arbitrary decision that you hopped on the wrong cart going to the fair?
Yeah, that was something I liked that they did. It kind of shows how kind of fleeting life is, especially in this world. And even if you look at the walkers, like they were people at some point. They had some story, and now they're just kind of fodder for our heroes to kill or to be used as a tool by the Whisperers. And so I like that they gave us just enough of their story for them to mean something when they killed them off. But, it was enough to humanize them, because I think often with the show, we kind of dehumanize humans, whether they're walkers or they're just kind of, NPC-ish type of, characters, or they're a red shirt. They're just there to get killed. So, even adding that little backstory, I think worked. And I kind of don't think we need it anymore, but it absolutely does kind of make you think, about, these are just people, and they're just kind of, one bad decision in this world and you're done. And it sucks to like make it this far, survive everything, survive the saviors, survive all they've been through. At the same time, like they made one right turn, to get to the hilltop, and it saved their lives. They could have way back when made that wrong turn, into Whisperer territory or to the saviors or whatever, and their lives could have been, worse. And so maybe at least they bought themselves a few years of a decent life. But it would definitely, I like what they did because it really got you thinking.
I always watch that too. Whenever anybody dies, even even if it's a red shirt, it's like they got so far into this. They survived so much. They survived the end of society. Civilization fell around them, and somehow they figured out a way to survive. And the smallest little thing in this world will just get you got. I feel the same way when I look at the walkers sometimes. Like they're missing a golden opportunity with these to really just film like little webisodes about iconic walkers and how they became the way they were. They did it once or twice, like with Bicycle Girl in the very first season, and I thought it was brilliant. We see these walkers sometimes, they call them hero walkers. They're the ones that are on screen. And I'm always like, well, that's really interesting. Their woods are interesting. They've got a cool look. How did that happen? You know, and you want to fill in the blanks in your mind. They did a really good job a couple seasons ago with Red Machete, and I think they should take advantage of that to expand the universe out. You know, how much would it cost to film one of these and put out a several-part episode, even during the off-season, showing us some of these walkers and where they came from? What do you think, IG?
I think that's a great opportunity to really kind of expand what you're doing. Because really, I mean, and it should be, because the walkers themselves really just kind of are a pack mentality. They don't think for themselves, kind of like lemmings. But some of them look so cool and look like something may have happened that why couldn't we like have Scottie Pippen at the end of a Bulls game like gets bit and all of a sudden is walking down with his Nikes and his gym shorts and chasing people through the streets, like things like that, and show a little thing of something becoming a walker, because there's got to be famous people that became walkers, people that came walkers really interesting ways or while they were doing something really interesting. And it would just really make kind of a fun tie-in. Like, where did these walkers come from? What were their lives before that? Because like I've said before, a lot of the walkers look like they were all just like they all shopped at the same store. Because nobody's wearing like flashy shoes or prom dresses or anything. Everybody looks the same. And I think they need to explore the ability to do some fun with it, because I think some of them could be scary, like some things in The Walking Dead are, and some could be just blatantly hilarious, and some just could be really kind of intriguing. You know, like here comes the Elon Musk walker. That'd be just great.
Well, let's expand on that point, because they did kind of joke about that in Zombieland when Bill fucking Murray showed up. Ryan, would it take you out of immersion if there was a famous walker in the herd, or say for some reason Jay Leno survived the zombie apocalypse and they ran into him? Would it be jumping the shark, or would it be interesting to you?
It's a good question. It's not the show. I think this show takes itself too seriously to do something like that. It would be hilarious, and I think it would be good for this show. I think adding a little bit of humor wouldn't hurt, but you know, they'd have to find the right way to do it, because I think for the way this show works, it would take me out of it. I think if you did that in, you know, any number of other shows, it wouldn't. But I think in this show, it'd be kind of tough to I just don't see it happening.
They did it a little bit in the comic book, because Tyrese was a famous football player. Even though I believe he retired due to injury, he was a football player, and it did come up throughout conversation. But they never really touched on that in the TV show. Tyrese was just a guy with a hammer that survived with his sister. I kind of would like to see that, like people of note, or have them draw more from what the people used to do in their lives before this all started. I think that would be really, really cool. Ryan, we cut to the fair. King Ezekiel is giving actually a really beautiful speech about how we're all bound together. He mentions Rick and Carl and even Jesus. You're a bit of a sap like me. I think we all are. Did it kind of hit you where it hurts when he brought it up? Did you notice they cut to Sadiq for the kind of the hard swallow emotional shot?
Yeah. No, it works. I think anything the King does works. I think he's criminally underused in this show. For someone as kind of charismatic as he is, he's kind of played more, you know, he's used when they need him, but I think, you know, he's one of the people that they could and should lean on beyond kind of a guy that, you know, is hanging out at a Renaissance fair. And I think too often he kind of comes across as that, even though I think he's just a much better actor than that, and I think deserves a lot more. But, you know, when they give him those speeches, he sells it, and he does it really well. So, you know, that one definitely kind of, it gives you the feels and really means something, and you know, for that moment, I'm really, you know, really into it, and it's kind of one of the times when I'm actually excited about the show.
And we wondered that, Ig, after Rick died, who would take the reins of the show and be that guy to give that speech? Do you think that Khary Payton's King Ezekiel kind of fits that mold? Is he as compelling a speaker as Rick Grimes?
As far as people that speak to groups and kind of inspire people, I think there is no one better than Khary Payton as King Ezekiel. As Ryan said, criminally underused, and there's an amount of charisma and just poise that comes with everything that he does in that stuff. And you and I both stood pretty near him at Walker Stalker when we went. And while he's very well put together, he's not a towering man. He's kind of short, as a matter of fact, probably about Ryan George's size. He's counting on that half inch to make himself feel tall. But he just carries himself so well, and he's got such a big smile, and his eyes are so full of life, and just the way that he speaks just calls to people. So he is the epitome of somebody that you would want to try and sell things. He is probably, as far as TV shows, as far as people monologuing, one of the best that I've seen in a long time.
Well, he is definitely not a tall guy, but he is a jack guy. If you remember his bicep, that guy was ripped. And I can tell you throughout meeting most of the cast that he is as close to his character as anybody that I've met. Like, he is a larger than life personality. He would be the center of attention even if he wasn't King Ezekiel on the show and you were just at a party. I think the only other person that probably comes close is maybe Jerry or Domingo Coleman from Fear. The same personality. I mean, Domingo is Strand. You talk to the guy and you're like, he doesn't have to do much to be this eloquent, smooth cat. And Jerry's the same way. He's a happy, jovial guy. Everybody wants to meet Cooper because how nice he is to everybody. But IG, we knew what was coming, but the characters didn't. And you look around this fair and everybody of note is there. Did you find yourself looking around and wondering who might not be here next week?
I wasn't sure they were going to do it at the end of this episode. I thought, and I'm glad they did, because that means next week's episode should be amazing. I thought they were going to wait till the finale to do what they did at the end of this episode. But yeah, as they kind of stopped on certain people's faces, I'm like, yeah, you might not make it. You might not make it. And, I knew who was going to go, but I was thinking maybe they put some out but didn't tell us everyone. And so, I was scared for everyone, and I'm still scared for some people because I'm not sure how these contracts are going to play out, how many people they're going to get back for next season, and maybe they're just going to take their out now and get themselves killed next week so that there's emotional impact going into the next season. I hope not. I mean, I think we talked about this offline earlier about we knew some of the names that were on there, and really on paper, they weren't very impactful, but that doesn't mean that the way they executed didn't work.
Yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get there, I know, but, I'm hoping the show doesn't think they need to give us somebody more impactful to keep us interested, because we have lost Jesus this season, and we've had other things going on. We lost Rick this season. We haven't seen Maggie for weeks. Months even. We saw her right at the beginning of this half season, and then she's been gone. So we're already kind of hurting as a fan base. If they take too much from us, I think it might hurt the show overall.
Well, after Daryl and company show up at the fair, there's a lot of emotional reunions amongst the old friends and the adorableness that is Judith Grimes. Ryan, did you feel that there was a little bit of foreshadowing Tara was doing as she's looking at Lydia as if she's the angel of death? And is one person, because you're the nicest one amongst us, is one person worth all this trouble?
No, I think no. I think we know from previous seasons that, one person isn't worth it. And I think, in this situation, even though you're trying to be the good person, if you're way back, it's like, look, let Lydia go. If Henry wants to follow her, let him follow her too, because they're going to, cause destruction among the group. I mean, they've just done it again and again. They can't seem to not kind of step over their toes when there are these threats. But yeah, it seemed like a little foreshadowing, but not, I don't know. I think maybe it's one of those things on a second viewing, you can look at it and identify maybe, things lingered a little bit, or they shot a certain way, or, someone gave somebody a look. But, you can definitely tell it's kind of ominous. Like, it was interesting kind of how they set the tone for the early part of the episode, because people were happy, and you wanted to think they were happy and having a good time, but you just could tell that it wasn't working and something wasn't right. Again, I don't know if that was if it was a kind of a writing or an editing decision, or if it just happened to be that way. But it really, did feel like, everybody should be happy and kind of intellectually it should work, but something wasn't right.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I do like how they kind of talked Tara down a little bit during the meeting when all the leaders came together. Basically, Michonne's like, they didn't trust me, and we sure as hell didn't trust you. You rolled in with the governor. And Rachel's like, yeah, we were going to stab you on the beach because we didn't trust you either. The one regret I did get out of this episode was that we see Rachel now as an adult, and we didn't get one more last Tara flip-off of Rachel before we came to a conclusion. Like I said, IG, the leaders come together to discuss the Skinned Menace. I couldn't think of a better name, and neither could they, apparently, and decide on a mutual defense pact and sign the path forward document. A very well-ly acted scene. But is it hard to fathom, with the massive threat around them all the time, that the communities would drift this far apart? You would think that the living, above all else, would want to fight the dead. How did they get this far apart? And do you think that this was needed to put them back together? Was it realistic?
I think this was the purest example of plot armor that we've seen on the show in a while. They needed to do this just to be able to put some of the story in place, because there's no way, with everything they went through last season and in previous seasons, that they would have drifted this far apart for any reason. You're going to have differences among communities, always. I mean, you put two people in the same room for a long enough amount of time, no matter how good of friends they are, they're going to have a disagreement. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that they're no longer going to be friends or that communities are still no longer going to work together. That's where I had a problem with it, but I just kind of just queued it up to disbelief, and they were just trying to advance their story a certain way. I didn't like the way, but it's a path, and it's a path that they chose. Especially everything that they went through when they were fighting the Sanctuary and the Saviors. They grew too close together and depended on each other so much that there's just no way that they would have not been together all this time. They knew what each one of them could bring, what each community had for the other. So yeah, this was a problem, and it was a thing I didn't really appreciate in the show, but they needed something. And yes, there was strife between like Maggie and Michonne, because Michonne didn't kill Negan, or Michonne and Rick didn't kill Negan. And maybe that's enough to make Maggie upset, but still, it's a community of people who all are alive and thriving because of Michonne and Rick. So they aren't going to just let, even if Maggie becomes your leader, they aren't going to just let you basically secede from the Union to not be a part of that, because there's too many good things that can happen when you're all working together, because you need people that can build and can farm, and you just need working hands. And to cut your working hands down by 60% just because you had a rift, it just doesn't make any sense.
They explained kind of where Michonne got emotionally, more than understandable, even though we didn't cover that last episode, but it still doesn't really fully explain the rift with Maggie, and I have a feeling if that show takes off, we'll probably never get an explanation. But I did love this scene. I love the coming together, and we can talk some character progression here in the scene, Ryan. I mean, the original leadership isn't there except for the king. Michonne admitted that she was wrong. Even apologized. Rachel's an adult. Tara is the leader. Gabe is respected. Carol's now embraced the queen. Whose journey has meant the most for you in that room, and why?
That's a good question. I would say Michonne, but it's tough for me to say because I feel like in some ways it's been forced on her, and kind of going back to what you guys were just talking about, it's tough because the writing has been better this half season, but with that 5-year layoff, and them kind of giving us this kind of rift between the communities, it doesn't make sense because they know strength in numbers, and they've been, and as you guys have said, they've been through so much. No issue between two people who fought through so much could be enough to allow them to drift apart. And they all know how all it takes is one kind of charismatic leader to rally a group of people together, and they're screwed. And they all know, they don't know who's out there, what's out there, what kind of people, what kind of threats. Clearly they didn't even know about the Whisperers. They didn't even know about the group of saviors that Carol had to burn to death. So it just doesn't make sense. And the fact that they didn't give us anything, it's less for me of like a mystery and more just annoying, because I know that they're saving it to shove down our throats at some point, but I just don't know. I don't trust them to give us something that's adequate. But I guess with that being said, we do know that there's something there with Michonne, and at least we know on some level we got something last week. There's some kind of a tension with Maggie, and so to see her kind of make do that 180, I think was an important thing for her, and to even see her kind of push Tara in the right direction, I think was a lot, and showed a lot of kind of growth for her as a character. So, I'd say she was the one in the room that really kind of affected me the most.
Well, I like the scene. It was beautifully written. It was beautifully acted. A nice goodbye between some of the characters, and we weren't 100% sure who in that room was going to make it to next week. So I enjoyed that portion of it. And I agree. I think Michonne growing as a leader, even though we all know that she's on her way out the door, her growing as a leader and admitting that she's wrong and even apologizing to Tara for taking the stance that she did, I thought was huge. But I enjoyed all of it. I like the fact that Carol embraced her role. I love the fact that Gabe has gone from somebody that was basically a coward and detested to a respected member of a leadership of a community. What did you think, IG? Which part in that did you enjoy the most?
I thought that, understanding and respecting that Gabriel really is the leader of the community at Alexandria. I think that really took strides, because if we remember, exactly like you said, when we first came across Gabriel, he was just a coward, and he didn't take chances, and he would board himself inside of his church and basically pray to survive another day. And here we are 7 years later, and yeah, he's got his creepy eye and his Children of the Corn hat, but he's out there and he's doing it and he's surviving and he's making the best effort he can to be a good person, a good leader, and fearless every day. And I can't be happier with any other character's progression. Like, he's just done so well. Like, I expect Michonne to be strong, and I expect her to be a good leader. When we were introduced to Gabriel, and even sometimes afterwards, we didn't expect that we would end up where we are with Father Gabriel. He's just really done wonders for me, and it's been acted very well by Seth Gilliam. I really am enjoying that character more than I ever thought I would, because initially I was like, can we just kill that guy off? And now I'm like, okay, he's creepy as hell, but I want more.
Yeah, I loved him on The Wire, but he's done things with the character, and the show has done things with the character that I didn't expect. And the next time the creepy group shows up at Alexandria, you throw that Children of the Corn hat, you march Gabriel up to the gate. I guarantee you nobody's going to mess with your community if they have to treat with that guy. They're going to be like, whoa. I mean, he even freaked Negan out, and that was before the eye. So he just gives them that smile, looking in two different directions. I think people are going to leave. They'll give Alexandria a wide berth. Ryan, we had some great acting between Connie and Kelly, and they discussed Connie's lack of goodbye. It was really kind of revealing, because she may have lost a child, and I personally have limited exposure with sign language, but were you impressed with just the raw emotion on display, even though they didn't speak a word between each other?
Yeah, they're great. I think they did a great job kind of introducing them as characters and getting us behind them, and I think they're all kind of unique and different in a way that we haven't seen on the show. They're both the dynamic of the entire group, and then the groups within the group, and then how they get along with other characters on the show. It's so unique, especially in her case, being having to use sign language, and even how she communicates with Daryl. I think it's really been interesting, and I think as the show, it remains to be seen kind of if they can kind of carry the load that Michonne and potentially the King may leave next year, but at least as secondary characters, I think they're great. And, maybe even, they can help to really carry the load as lead characters. But I think they've done a great job kind of introducing that whole group. And again, the group dynamic. And, there's at this point, there's some of the most interesting characters in the show.
IG, before the group heads out to kind of get the 411 on what's going on, Connie finds Daryl and asks him to be safe. And in return, he hands over the ownership of Dog for her to take care of. Do you think they are headed towards a relationship? And what does that say that Daryl would entrust his beloved pet to her?
I don't know. I mean, maybe Dog is a beloved pet to him because of how useful Dog is, but I don't know. Daryl seems like he's been reticent to form a true relationship with most people lately, and this seems about as close as he's come. But if he is going to entrust anybody with anything that matters to him, why not Connie? She's shown that she's resilient, she's smart, she plans, she knows how to handle herself, she knows how to protect others. She is a smarter, better-looking Daryl, and she bathes more often, so it works even better in Daryl's behalf, because at least he can smell something nice. Because, Daryl still needs a bath, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry. He looks dirty all the time, and it bothers me. But he has just, there's a bond between him and Connie that just works. Right? Their screen chemistry is very, very good, and surprisingly so, because obviously I don't think that Daryl speaks much sign language besides flipping the bird. But it's very fun to watch, and I think that it's very effective and could be something for the future. And I really kind of hope it is, because I think it'd be fun to watch Daryl grow in a new direction. Because everybody's been like, well, why doesn't Daryl do this or that? And this is one that really hasn't presented itself all that much, but I think it would just be interesting. It would be nice. And I think it might ground Daryl even further, because this is somebody that, like, despite the fact that she can't hear, has been totally able to protect herself. And I think that's amazing.
One of the things I thought when I first saw her, and there's just the laziness in me, is why can't she lip read? But I'm glad that they can't, because then they would just use that as a vehicle to kind of circumvent what they're trying to do. The fact that she finds non-digital forms of communications and way to get her message out, even by writing on a piece of pen and paper, is kind of become endearing to me, where I believe it was Weeds, one of the kids had a hearing impaired girlfriend, and they would just text back and forth. And I'm kind of glad that they didn't go that route with it. I prefer the pen to paper, even though it's probably non-conventional in dangerous situations. I really like Connie as a character, and I really hope that they kind of build on her a little bit more.
Now, I think she can lip read some, though, because a couple episodes ago, when they were up in that building, when they were going to try and trap the Whisperers, some of the things Daryl was saying he wasn't writing down all the time, and she was responding. So I think she can lip read.
But I'm glad that's not the only way they use for her to communicate.
I like everything else they do as well. I think everything else they do really grounds the character even further, that she wants to make sure that the communication is so clear that she'll write it down.
Ryan, Carol, and Michonne and company head out to try to find out what's going on. They're on the trail of the Hilltop people, but they wander into the woods and get surrounded by walkers. Some cool fights, cutscene that we haven't really seen since the Battle of Alexandria, and they take a bunch of walkers down, but then they're surrounded by Whisperers. The 4 fan favorites just surrounded, overwhelmed, and Beta walks out, tells them to drop their weapons, and basically tells them, we had a deal. Nobody else had to die. All you had to do was give us the girl. That deal is off. Did you think one of these 4 favorites was a goner?
No, only because I kind of knew it was coming. The other reason why, though, is I thought it was too similar to what happened with Negan way back when. And although I think the smart thing to do would have been to kill them all, if you're Alpha, but I guess she has her reasons. But it kind of that part smelled a little too much like what was going on with Negan. So I kind of figured, okay, they're going to send a message, but the message is probably, going to be a little bit different from how it happened. It won't be quite, it won't happen in real time, I guess.
Obviously, you need to do this. You need to put your heroes in sticky situations for storytelling, but it's really unrealistic that people as evil as this would let anybody walk away, especially, the best fighters or the leadership of any community. If you're going to send a message, you're not going to kill Joe Schmo. You're going to kill Daryl Dixon. I did like the scene, and it was a tight spot. spot. I'm not quite sure why they felt the need to make a mask out of Miles, or why everybody else had a knife, but suddenly this guy has a gun. I don't know why they went that direction with it, but it was a very scary situation and very well shot. You know, you got some overhead action, some overhead shots that made it look suffocating, not on the level of Battle of the Bastards, but still, for Walking Dead, really nicely done scene. How about you, IG? Did you think anybody in that circle of 4 wasn't going to walk away?
I thought at least one. They'd have to, even if they didn't kill them then, I thought they would take one and keep them and try and pry information, do something, use them as leverage to try and get Lydia back. Any number of things could have happened. And I certainly thought with Beta showing up there that just for what happened in that hospital, Daryl Dixon would at least get something. Get beat up, get hit, get kicked in the nuts, something. And that was probably my biggest disappointment in the episode, is that you just did nothing to them. You have basically like 80% of the leadership of all these communities right here in a group surrounded by 20 people, and they're not going to survive. They might take a few out with them, but they're not going to survive if you decide to attack them. And you just let them go. I just did not get it. And I think that, again, plot armor and stories, the way that they need to build these stories, I get it. They have to do these things because if they just kill all of them off, you're going to upset your fan base so much if you kill all of them off, or even one of them of that group. If you killed one of them off right there, they're going to be so upset that you're just not going to have a good time trying to recover from that. But yeah, I didn't think they were all going to get away, and I actually kind of hoped they weren't going to all get away because I just think it would have made for better storytelling. But on the same hand, I guess I'm still kind of glad that they did, because I don't know what they would do unless they really started to lean heavily on the king, who I think may not be long for this either.
Ryan, let's talk about a character. We'll build the perfect character. He's a man of honor. He will fight for the woman he loves, even if it puts himself in jeopardy. He'll always do the right thing. His parents are fan favorites. In another life, we could be describing, or in another show, we could be describing Captain America, right? But still, on The Walking Dead, we have one of the most disliked characters in show history. What could they have done to redeem Henry? And why was he so disliked?
It's a problem with a lot of shows and how they write kind of teenage boys, and girls, actually, to be fair. I think that they often just write them to be kind of moody and uninteresting and kind of singularly focused on whatever is their obsession, and because they can't have it, they're just miserable because of that, and so we just end up with the character that you know is just always in a bad mood. And granted, look, like we've all dealt with teenagers, and there's some teenagers that are like that, but I think they tend to be written so kind of one-dimensional, and they're kind of written as instrument. It's not about Henry as a character, but about us kind of connecting to him in order for them to kind of pull the rug out from under us. I think it's an issue of just they like a lot of shows they just don't know how to make characters likable, and I think it's you got to make them whole, make them interesting, make them fun, make them not moody all the time. Show them when they have successes and when they have failures, and just make them more well-rounded. Because I think that's the issue, and so I think we got Henry kind of the other part is just he was just shoved down our throats. Like it was all Henry all the time, and there was no real build to it. We had him as a younger character, but it was the same thing there. He was just kind of a moody, sad kid, and then he was a moody, sad, teenager who did stupid things, for a girl that he just met, who was part of a murderous group. It was just written poorly. I think what it comes down to, and I'm kind of ranting now, is like I think they just took the audience for granted. They took for granted that the audience was just going to accept the character and fall for him, and he'll have meaning. And that's just not how it works. And I think we all, see through it. And especially if you're a big fan of the show.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up question. Would the storyline have been better if they would have done the right thing and kept Chandler Riggs around, and it was Carl in this Lydia storyline?
Absolutely, because I think Carl. That's the thing is they had the same issue writing Carl, and I think Carl finally started to come into his own the last half season before they killed him off. And so I think if you take the way Carl was developing and finally kind of coming into his own and becoming a character that was kind of standing apart from his father and who is becoming a leader himself, I think that version of him would have worked completely different and much better, and I think we would have been on board, and his death there would have meant something. I think his death was played for shock value on the show, and I think if they had done everything the same except it was Carl and not Henry, even if they killed him off here, that has far more meaning than it did what they did before, and Henry's death, like, it just, as we'll talk about, when we get to it, like, it didn't do it for me.
Yeah, I think they dropped the ball when they let Chandler go. Sure, we redeemed it a little bit with Judith, but I would have loved to see Judith and Carl play off each other, even though there was an age difference. I would have loved to see how him and Lydia would have reacted and how the storyline would have played if it was a character that we were a little more familiar with. I forget the kid's first name, but his last name was Lintz. He took over for his brother. He's a little older. I don't know how experienced of an actor he was, but at that point, Carl had quite a few seasons acting for a career. And so Chandler was a little bit better of an actor of him, and he didn't have these, annoying little tics that the actor that was playing Henry did. I really think they made a mistake there. IG, Alpha visits the king and Lydia at the fair, and then we jump back into the nighttime hours and she's instantly back with Daryl's group. Was this manipulation of the timeline just enough of a detour to make it difficult to pin down who might be checking out? Did you like the switcheroo that they played on everybody?
Yeah, I think what it did is it really kind of messed with me. It was jarring, and jarring in a good way, because you go from the fair and everybody happy, and all of a sudden you see Alpha walking around, and honestly, the first couple of times I saw her walking around, I'm like, who is that? And then all of a sudden she started talking. I'm like, oh my God, Alpha's at the fair. So whatever they did with that just worked, because we're not used to seeing her clean. We're not used to seeing her with hair. It worked. And then we're going back, and then she's standing with all the dirt and everything back on her face and talking to Daryl. It was jarring with the jumps back and forth. And I think that was the intent, because it worked. Like, it set me on edge so that I was like, what's going on? What are we doing here? What's happening? And then, like, she started explaining boundaries and what's our land and where you're allowed to be. And I was like, what's going on? And that's when I got my first real inkling that we're about to have some heads on pikes. And I was like, is this really going to happen this episode? No way it's going to happen this episode. That's too big of a thing. That's got to be next week, because it's the finale. Well, I was wrong. But yeah, it was really, really cool and really creepy. I still hold that Alpha so far is probably the purest, scariest character on The Walking Dead thus far. Like, Negan was scary, but he was scary funny and scary charismatic. Alpha is just scary, just all around, just creepy, scary. And to be honest, I love it.
She called it her horde, Ryan, but Alpha brings Daryl over to a cliffside and shows him her group and reveals that the Whisperers essentially control what looks to be thousands of walkers. As impressive as it was, why? What are they doing?
They're this crazy cult that, I guess, whether they believe, kind of whether they worship the walkers or kind of hold them in some high regard, or they just realize that their strength in numbers. I think either one works, and that's an intimidating sight. I think we know at this point that no one walker is a real threat for the most part, but their numbers can make them dangerous, and if you have them by the thousands, it's really hard to fight them off. And so I think the fact that she commands them, sends a message that she's not to be messed with. She's clearly spent a lot of time and effort in doing that, and if that's what she, who knows what else she has. So yeah, I mean, they're a weird, creepy society, and I think that's one of the more interesting aspects of this of the show for me is now that you've kind of, it's the apocalypse, kind of civilizations restarting. What weird kinds of civilizations? Because clearly you are going to get some that kind of want to be one with the walkers or somehow more connected, and clearly she is. I think for me it's more I'd love to get into her head and figure out, is for her, does she believe that the walkers are more meaningful than just kind of tools to be used against other people, or is it just that? Or are they just kind of a weapon to be unleashed whenever necessary?
Yeah, I agree with you. And IG, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but this really was kind of Samantha Morton's and Alpha's coming out party. We saw on previous episodes that she was willing to sacrifice a baby, and she just flat out killed one of her followers for seeing her cry. What makes her as a character scarier than Negan?
I think it's her no fucks given attitude, if you'll excuse my language. Carol has that, but she still cares about people. She still cares about her group. She still wants them to understand how much she cares about them. Alpha is purely the alpha and will assert herself as the alpha, and has as much said so that I need to act this way because I'm the alpha. I can't show weakness in anything, and she believes that, and she's going to keep going that way and will stop at nothing if provoked. I think that level of commitment to how you and your group that follows you is going to live puts you at such an advantage in any kind of situation that you are just too scary for anyone to really trust. I mean, this is like a Kim Jong-un or Kim Jong-il type situation where, like, can you really trust if they give you some kind of promise that anything is going to be true? Because they're really there for their self-interest if they're there talking to you. Going forward, though, Ryan, do you think our biggest mistake is assuming that the communities are weak because they still live in a civilized society?
It depends on how much intel she has on the communities, because I think if it's simply that she thinks, well, civilization's done, so why try? They're naturally weak because they're trying to be civilized. Then that is a problem for her, because she doesn't know how armed they are. She doesn't know, what kind of weapons they have. And at the end of the day, they have thousands of walkers, but she's still just human, and they can all be mowed down depending on the kind of weaponry, they have and how secure their societies are. So, if she has some intel where she knows what they're capable of, that's one thing. But if she's just kind of underestimating them because they're part of civilization, then that might be problematic. And I sense that, as next season goes on, it will be shown that she's kind of underestimated their strength and their resolve, especially considering what they've been through over the years.
I've marked the border to the north. You'll see it as you leave is an extremely ominous statement. And it feels like we're inching to the moment that we've been all waiting for, the moment that kind of given me pause all week. As they begin to leave, they find Cinik tied to a tree and beaten. And then they come upon a ridge with 10 heads on pikes. IG, what did you think of this beautifully but painfully shot scene and the character choices they made to get piked? Well, I think that the character choices could have been more impactful. I think they should have chosen. Some of them I think were impactful enough based on things that have been happening in recent episodes. Tara, for example, that was hugely impactful because, she's leading the hilltop. Big time there. Henry, because they've been force feeding us Henry as a storyline all season, so they're trying to make it impactful. Some of them not so impactful, like those teenagers that tried to take Henry out and get him in trouble. Not as impactful in our view. But imagine you're these people and these are from all of your communities. There's some from each community, heads on pikes. And not only that, but the heads are still alive because now they're walker heads. They just have no legs, so now they're not going to walk. Seeing that and seeing these things, seeing Tammy Rose, who just basically had adopted a baby and was going to take care of this baby. Seeing Henry even there, like for Carol, who had taken Henry as her son, and Carol being there, they turned into something that is impactful for all of these communities together. Now, one thing that you could hope that it would do if you're Alpha and the Whisperers is that it's going to drive them apart because now they're all going to go into self-preservation mode. Having seen what our communities have done in the past, we know that realistically it's going to start to pull them back together, which is great for the show. It's great for all of us. Hopefully we don't lose too many people in the finale or in the beginning of the next season, because there are some characters that we love that are still in play. We understand Michonne's going to leave. I hope that there's some late breaking thing to keep her around. I hope that Carrie Payton doesn't leave as the king, because we could really do to keep him around. But the thing is the way they put this on there and the way they showed it to us
was so well shot, so beautifully shot, and so impactful that the music selection, the cinematography, the ominous looks from everybody that were there, and how it was acted with everybody, it couldn't have been done better unless they put more impactful people on the pikes, and I think that would have been a bigger problem.
Ryan, what did you think of the scene and the characters chosen?
Yeah, so I think from a technical standpoint, they knocked that out of the park. Kind of coming into it knowing a little bit about the scene, from what reading different articles and hearing what people have said, I think they took whatever was on the comic book page and really made it great. The even that little added effect of them being live walker heads was really, really cool and chilling. The kind of montage and kind of intertwining it with the other characters was done really well. It was I felt a little heavy-handed. It was still, again, technically really, really well done. Really good with the music. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think that on one hand, they knew the character choice wasn't good. And so by intertwining that with the characters that would miss them, I think that was supposed to be the kind of emotional center of that scene. Carol's reaction, Enid's boyfriend, forgetting his name, kind of looking for her. That part, that was supposed to be the emotional center, but it just still quite doesn't hit because we're so used to that in this show. We needed to feel it. Like, we needed the gut punch. And so I think they dropped the ball there because, kind of I've heard it referred as like the red wedding of The Walking Dead. And it doesn't hit that because, again, we never felt like we were stabbed in the throat. It was executed. Execution was great. And kind of as a viewer, you're witnessing somebody's pain. But I think, if they wanted that to really resonate with us, I think they needed us to feel that pain the way we felt it. Like, well, I guess I won't, if you haven't watched Game of Thrones yet, spoiler alert. But, well, no, I'll not say it, but, yeah, it was a gut punch for the red wedding in a lot of ways. And I think we needed that for this. And so I think they really dropped it there.
Well, like a Walking Dead gut punch is like when they killed Glenn and Abraham, so that was a gut punch. Yeah, we all felt that.
And you know what? So I think here's where they dropped the ball. Jesus, again, like Jesus's death, that felt like, again, kind of like Carl's death. Like, it was just thrown in there. We didn't need that, and I think that scene, the way it played out, would have been just as impactful if they had killed off somebody else, because it's like, oh my God, there's a walker that's actually moving like a human. Like, that was such a cool scene visually. We didn't need it to be Jesus. It kind of felt like it was, they were just, they wanted to give us a shocking moment, but at what cost? Seeing Jesus' head on a pike would have been impactful. That would have made a difference. So I think where they really dropped the ball is they should have saved his death, knowing that he was going to be off the show. It would have been far better in this scene than it was in the scene, that we got.
You completely stole what I was about to say. I was going to say the same exact thing. But no, I agree with you. Even if, say, Tom didn't want to film the last couple episodes, if the Whisperers would have kidnapped him and held him till this point, and the big reveal was, we haven't seen Jesus in episodes, and then he shows up on a pike, or say that would be a perfect way to write Lauren Cohen off, is if we're sure Maggie's not going to come back, she must have got ambushed and drug along with everybody and put up there. They relied too much on the emotional impact that it had on the characters rather than who it was. That being said, this was as near a perfect scene on The Walking Dead as we'll ever see. Shot well, acted well, and the impact was there even though the lineup was a tad bit lackluster. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I've watched it 3 or 4 times, just that scene over and over again, and I got chills every single time because it was just done right. Red Wedding? No, it wasn't. I mean, in order for it to be the Red Wedding, they would have had to bust in and kill everybody at the fair, and that's not the way they went with it. We're definitely comparing apples to oranges there, but Game of Thrones is never going to be Walking Dead, and I hate to tell Walking Dead fans that because they get upset. IG, Cinik delivers a tale of the departed. Their dying breath, they made their last stand. Everybody fought back and they fought like hell. And what they did was more than brave. Your final thoughts on his story, the episode, and your rating.
Cinik hit me with a story, man. Like, the way he told that, he shows he's got some ability to step up in one of the carrying roles in this show. He's really been kind of a B player thus far, but he could step into an A role because he's got something, and it's working for me. And the story he told of how they were really trying to take their chance, to make their stand and see if they could get out alive, was just really, really heart-moving and heartbreaking all at the same time. I really enjoyed this episode a lot. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this half a season, it's been my favorite episode thus far. It's been really well acted. We finally got to get this fair. They're watching some movie with an animated cat, or what is it, Baby Huey cartoon. And hopefully that's just before they get an actual movie, but I digress. I still think they're going to have to watch Ishtar just as punishment for everything that's gone on. I like this episode. I'm going to give it a 9, and I'm hoping that next week doesn't turn down so much that it makes the next season look down going into it. And we need something to get us excited. Now, it doesn't need to be an upturn for the heroes where all of a sudden it looks like they're victorious. It can be down that way, but they need to make it exciting. They don't really need to cliffhanger it, but it needs to be ready to go. I think they have the pieces in place to move into that. Let's see if they can do it. But I give this episode a 9.
I thought his speech was great. It was moving in the face of kind of that kind of adversity. It's something you kind of need to hear, and knowing what became of them, it's nice to hear that they went down with the fight, and hopefully that kind of motivates everybody else and reinforces what the fair was meant to be. The episode. Execution-wise, I think was really strong. As I talked about with the earlier scenes, it was impactful. I think it had, a couple of great speeches, a lot of great moments, really some great intrigue, phenomenal acting throughout. Like I said, I think that it just didn't quite hit as well as I think they wanted it to, for me. Although, again, it's hard to argue with the execution. I just think they should have been bolder with their choices, and maybe that, look, at the end of the day, I think there were a lot of creative decisions that have been made over the last couple of years that I'm pretty sure Angela Kang and co would like to have back, and I think because of that they're kind of dealing with the consequences of that, and so they can't make certain decisions that they'd like to, because at the end of the day, as much as we talk about it needing to be impactful, we also realize that they can't kill they've got so few main, A-level characters left that it would be really tough for them to kill them off. So, and the B-level characters are kind of sitting in wait because we might lose some of the A-level characters soon. So I think they are in a tough spot, and they did the best with what they can. I would give this 8.5. I say this season so far, this half season has definitely been the best The Walking Dead has been in a really long time. So I do hope that they're able to kind of build on this, next episode and moving forward. Because it is, for the first time in a long time, I'm actually looking forward to watching it, where it had become a chore for a while.
Yeah, you kind of tapped out on us, and you were like, "I'm on the fence with this show, and I really, and I'll watch it because we're covering it." And
Look, if we weren't covering it, I was done.
But then I tell you to take a few shows off, and you're like, "But it's getting good," and I'm like, "All right, Ryan's back," and it does make you wonder how the departures of some of the cast members has changed the way they would want to do things. And maybe they just didn't feel that they had the leeway to throw an A-list actor on there because they are kind of getting few and far between. I really think that the Whisperer's done screwed up. And when Queen Carol gets a hold of Alpha, it's going to be on. The comic book says something different, but I have a feeling that Carol and Alpha are going to meet. In terms of The Walking Dead, the Com before was a masterpiece. It really was. Through the run of the series, was one of the better shows. And by far the best show of the season. Although I had some issues with the cast that they chose to pick, I loved the way it was presented. And they kept us guessing throughout the episode. Even up to the end, it could have been Rosita, with Father Gabriel and Eugene talking. And it could have been the King with the way that they mess with timelines. I'm not going to lie. I got the chills the second, third, fourth time I watched it. I mean, it did have enough of an emotional flair there to kind of compel me. I felt that Angela Kang's fingerprints were all over this, and it was brilliant. It was painful and beautiful and everything The Walking Dead should be, and it was at its finest. The cast acted their ass off this week, including Danae, Kari, and Norman. Yes, I said it. Norman Reedus stole the Pike scene. I mean, I think he even out-acted Melissa. We said goodbye to a bunch of characters I could care less about, but we did it in amazing fashion. I give the Calm Before a 9.5.
And that's it for this episode of the Cinik Radio Podcast. I'm Igrihe. We had a great time bringing you this week's show. Please send all your comments, questions, concerns, and any crazy news stories from your neck of the woods to CINIKRADIO@gmail.com. Find us on the internet at CINIKRADIO.com. Look for us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRADIO. And find us on Twitter at CINIKRADIO. Continue to like, listen, subscribe, and share this with all your friends and family. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.